Hey everyone, and welcome to the latest Eagle Eye podcast presented by Nissan with Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Rube, we actually have some news to talk about today.
Yeah, Brandon Brooks, not a shock to anybody. Hangs him up after 10 years, 3 Pro Bowls, a Super Bowl. Uh, Short career, short period of greatness with the Eagles, but when he was healthy, man, he was as good as any guard I've ever seen. And yeah, and a great guy, and we'll miss him.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Brandon and our memories of him and where it leaves the Eagles. That's what we'll lead with. But we also want to mention later on, we'll talk about the coaching cycle, who's getting jobs, who's not getting jobs. We'll look back at my 2021 Eagles awards. You can kind of disagree with some of those. I'm sure you will. And then you have our predictions from before the year. And you keep saying I did well, but your insistence to use them makes me very skeptical. I don't think I did as well as you're saying, but
Dave doesn't trust me.
I don't. But let's start with Brandon Brooks because you're right. Like it's not a huge surprise. He's played 2 games in the last 2 years. His body just it your time rehabbing, and that's really what he's done the last 2.5 years. Even more than that, really, when you go back to some of the injuries he's had. How will you remember him? I mean, because he was you're right. At his peak, there were a few guys doing it better.
Yeah, and I think the tendency right now is to think of still a young guy. I mean, he's relatively young for an NFL, especially for an offensive lineman. They tend to play into their 30s, and it's easy to kind of, you remember the recent things, the injuries, the rehabs, the injuries, the frustration. But I'll look back on him as just just such a powerful, athletic guard at right guard, and what he was able to do with Lane and Kelsey, and just what that right side of the O line was like. Is I mean, I've like Sean Andrews, who had a shorter period of greatness, but was really, really good when he was healthy and was all there. He was probably the best guard I've ever seen. But Brooks is better, and I think his legacy is going to be equally what he meant for, when it comes to mental health. And he was one of the first guys of his stature to really be public about mental health and his struggles, and um, inspired a lot of people. If my Twitter feed is any judge, the number of people that he inspired to get help and to get counseling or meds or whatever it is, and to confront what he calls his inner demons. That's a huge thing too. So I remember him. I think when I look back, it's just one of the nicest guys. We all love to go back to that corner of the locker room and hang out with the O lineman. JP was always grumpy. Well, he was never there, but because Lane and Kelsey and Brooks, their lockers were all next to each other, and so it was like a party back there. You go and hang out with whoever was there. But I know you knew him a lot longer than any of us, but going back to Houston, and you guys were super close. So I know you must be there were a lot of emotions coming back. Dave wrote a really good column about his experiences with Brandon, so you should check it out on our site too.
Thanks. Yeah, for me it's weird because he's really the only guy I've covered for like his entire career that's a long career. Because I was like, I covered the Eagles a little bit in like 2011, 2012, and then I was in Houston, and then I came back. I didn't start covering the Eagles again until 2015. So I haven't really. There's no one else who I've covered that long. So yeah, that part for me is it's kind of weird seeing someone who basically started at the same time as me retiring. Yeah, but he's a great guy, and he had so much potential in Houston, and it really took him coming here to kind of unlock it when we're talking about on the field. And then off the field, what I appreciated about how, first off, how open he was and honest about mental health, but he didn't speak about it in his. I'm going to try to explain as best I can. So many times when people talk about mental health, they use these like big umbrella terms and they make it sound like something it's not. But with him, it was very relatable. He said, "This is what I'm dealing with," and he talked about like the inner workings of what he was dealing with. It was like, yeah, I need to get my meds right. I need to go to therapy. And it was like very specific and very matter of fact, which I appreciated because so many times when we talk about mental health, even the term mental health can mean so many things. It's like this umbrella term. Uh, and I think the way he explained it all made it so special, because he could have said, I'm dealing with some mental health issues and we all deal with them, but he did a lot more than that, and he was about as honest as you could be about these things, and I appreciated that part of it.
And I think that made it, you used the word relatable. I think that kind of humanized it, and allowed people to say, you know what, I never realized I'm dealing with that too, and I can get help. And you're right. I mean, that's totally true. Um, yeah, it's funny you say, he's one of the few guys you covered from the start of his career to the end of his career. I mean, there's not many for me either. P. Host was one. Retzlaff.
It is funny though, and I wasn't trying to make an old joke, but it's a weird experience for me, and it's something I like you don't think about too much. And it was a weird column to write, because I tried not to insert myself too much, but for that one I kind of felt like I needed to.
Yeah.
It's just a weird deal. It's like and it's the last couple of years have been tough because we haven't been able to really like form relationships in the locker room, but you spend a lot of time with these people, and it is a working relationship. We're friendly, certainly. We're not best buds, but you spend a lot of time with these people, and yeah, it's weird. Like, you start off as like they're strictly football players, and you're interviewing them to learn about how they play football, and then you end up like, man, I spent 10 years with this guy, and you learn a lot about him and his family and all that stuff. So it's weird. It's definitely it's something that I never thought about when I got into this business.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You once you start communicating with guys on a non-football level. I mean, I remember when I first told Malcolm Jenkins, my dad used to teach at Ohio State. And then for like the rest of the time that he was here, that was our thing. It was like, I was born in Columbus because my dad was teaching at Ohio State at the time. And that always became, the Ohio State, and he, at first he wanted to know if he had him in a class. I was like, well, I was a little before your time, Malcolm. But yeah, it's really, for me, it's been one of my favorite parts of the job. And like you said, I mean, the last 2 years have been tough because we haven't been in the locker room since I think the day after the Seahawks playoff game. That was the last time we were in the locker room.
Yeah.
That's that time in the locker room when you're not working on a story and you're just kind of meeting guys and talking to them. And, we all have guys that we would, like, all right, I've no interviews I really need right now. I'm going to go talk to Kelsey, or I got no interviews I need. I'm going to go talk to Rodney. Those few guys, we don't get that now. And it's a shame, but Brandon was one of those guys who he would always entertain, whether he was doing an interview or just BSing. He would always be in his locker chatting up everybody. And, he'll do well in whatever he's a young guy. He's 32. He talked about he wants to go to Wharton. He wants to study. He said he's been interested all his life or recently in investing. And he talked about, I guess it was a 30 for 30 about what was the percentage of former players that go broke?
It's a lot. Yeah.
So over 70%. And he wants to, so he said he's always had an affinity for that, and he'll do well in whatever he does. He talked in 16 at his locker when he went public with the anxiety. He said, he had an unhealthy obsession with football, and he's such a perfectionist, which is, a common theme in people who have anxiety and depression and other mental health issues, because, if you're a perfectionist, you're never going to be perfect. So you're always striving for something that's unattainable, which I guess could lead to, to some issues. And maybe getting away from football will be good for him, in some ways, without that pressure. And he talked about that at length, the pressure that elite athletes have on them every day, every minute. So I wish him well. He said he's going to stay in the area. I think he lives in Medford Lakes, somewhere out there, out in your territory. I'm glad he's staying. It's funny because so many guys stay in the area just because they're embraced so much by the fans here, and they feel like part of the Eagles family. And the Eagles have done a great job, including former players in so many ways. and I'm glad he's going to be around. So I wish him well. He'll do well in whatever he tries.
Yeah, and he's I mean, he's a smart guy. Went to Miami of Ohio. It's a pretty good school, and that was the first thing I remember. Right after they signed him, I was at the Novacare, I guess, to do a press conference with someone else because he wasn't in town yet, and I ran into Kelsey, and I asked Kelsey if I've ever met him. He's like, no, like, I've never met him. So it was really weird. I was standing there talking to Jason Kelsey about his former or his future teammate at that point, or I guess at that point he was his current teammate. But they had like known some mutual people. Chris Myers, who played in Houston for a long time, lives in this area now, and so like Chris knew Jason, and Jason knew, so that there was some connection there. But I'll never forget that because it was really fun getting to tell Kelsey something he didn't know for once.
Usually it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Score big with the AAA Eagles MVP membership, along with the superb roadside assistance and discounts you've come to expect from AAA. Get exclusive Eagles-related perks. For all the details, visit AAA.com/Eagles. Nissan just made your choice for a new car an easier one than ever with their most exciting and fuel-efficient lineup. The choice is yours, and get great offers across Nissan's full line. Shop your local Nissan store today at nissanusa.com.
You asked me an interesting question, and I'm not sure of the answer to it. You asked me, and this was yesterday, I think, if Brandon is going to end up in the Eagles Hall of Fame. And it's a tough one because there are so many guys from this era, and specifically the Super Bowl team, that are worthy, but it's like you can't let everyone in.
Yeah, and I think at some point, maybe in 2027, they'll induct the team, as a team. But individually, yeah. I was looking at that today, and I was thinking, like, maybe 3 Pro Bowls. Anyone who has 3 Pro Bowls or more as an Eagle should be in. But then I looked it up. There's like 43 guys who've made 3 Pro Bowl teams. And I mean, I lean toward yes. And you had the idea of, and I like how they put guys in as a ticket, like, Wes and Andre, Clyde and Seth. Guys should go in. And I think we all think of Lane and Brandon together. They played next to each other, very close. So I kind of see them maybe going in together. I think that you brought that up yesterday. I do think he will go in at some point. But yeah, it's tough. I don't know. Maybe they can start, adding more than 2 people.
It's crazy. Like, think about all the guys from that team who should be there.
I think I did a story on that after the Super Bowl. I think I wrote, how many guys from this team will be in the. The no-brainers are, Randall, go for it. No, the no-brainer. Guys like Ertz. Ertz is a lock.
Kelsey, obviously.
Kelsey, Malcolm, JP is a lock. Who didn't play in the game.
Nick will go in.
Yeah, Nick. They should have put Nick in the next day. They should have waived all.
That's already what, 7 guys?
Yeah. Yeah. Who else? I don't know. It's interesting to think about. A lot of those guys on that team weren't here all that long. The Chris Longs and Patrick Robinsons and Corey Grahams. They're good players that had a lot to do with it, but LeGarrette Blount and Jay Ajayi aren't going to be in the Eagles Hall of Fame. I guess the other quarterback won't be. Even though he's got some team records, but yeah, I don't think he'll be in the Colts Hall of Fame either. But it's interesting. I think Brooks has a pretty good chance.
Yeah,
I think
his peak was so good. That 20 and that's the most amazing football accomplishment of his. 2019, he was coming off his first Achilles, and he didn't just come back in the shortest amount of time possible. He played at the best level he's ever played in his life.
Yeah.
That 2019 season, he got snubbed so bad for All Pro. He should have been a lock for All Pro.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. Probably his best year. He's walking away from a lot of money, and I don't know if he wanted to keep playing. I'm not sure what the Eagles had in store, what they were thinking. I have so much respect for him because, some guys just don't know when to stop, and they just kind of make the rounds of teams trying to get that last paycheck. Um, I just have a lot of respect for him. When knowing there's not a lot of guys, they know when it's time and they walk away. And and he did. He's never going to have to rehab again, and I'm sure he's happy about that.
I would think so. So let's talk about what it means for the team because I think we're already kind of under the assumption that he wouldn't be back in
Right.
2022. So I don't really know if it changes much from that perspective. The next big question is if Jason Kelsey follows him.
Yeah, and from a purely football standpoint, I couldn't feel stronger that Landon Dickerson has to stay at left guard. And people are talking about moving him to center. And I mean, first of all, he played so well at left guard, and he and Mulata have a special thing. I mean, what they have on the left side is kind of what Brandon Brooks and Lane had on the right side for those years. They just work so well together, and they just maul people. And why would you break that up? Why would you move Landon Dickerson? Plus, at 335, I don't think there's any centers in the league at 335. I mean,
He's 6'6".
he's not a center. And I know he played some center in college. He was moving all over the place because of injuries and transfers and all kinds of different things. He's also bigger than he's ever been, and he's not a center. And I think the trend, and I think Kelsey kind of started the trend. The trend is for centers to be like 285 to 290 and athletic and moving around. And Dickerson's athletic, but 335. You certainly don't want to ask him to lose weight. I mean, he's a powerhouse, so he's got to stay at left guard. And I think Sayamala would get the first crack at right guard. He hasn't played right guard. I think he can handle it, assuming Kelsey's back. If Kelsey retires, I think Sayamala is your center, and Driscoll probably is the first guy in a right guard.
It's amazing. Like that's not a bad line.
It's not a bad line.
I
Yeah.
mean, if you lose two guys, one with 3 Pro Bowls, the other with what 7 Pro Bowls and 4 All Pros,
I think 5 Pro Bowls.
only 5 Pro Bowls.
Yeah.
Gosh, that's stupid. He should have 7.
Yeah.
Anyway, but if you lose those two guys, and you're still left with a line of Mailata, Dickerson, Samalu, Driscoll, Johnson. I mean, not many teams could put out a line like that after losing 2 players like Kelsey and Brooks.
Yeah, it's true. And then, I think Herbie is, I think Driscoll's ahead of Herbie, but Herbie's a functional player. He's good. He can play right guard. And a lot of that just speaks to, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I mean, we talked about Jeff Stoutland so many times, but he has so much to do with this O-line too. Plus, all those guys you just mentioned are draft picks. And Lane was the only one who was a 1. I mean, Dickerson was a 2, Mulata was a 7, Sayamala was a 3, Driscoll was a 4. Howie's had some spectacular misses, including one on the O-line, but for the most part, he's found offensive linemen in the draft, and Stoutland knows what to do once he gets them, and they don't have to be first-round picks. I mean, Stoutland can turn. Well, I don't say anybody because he did coach the fireman, but he's a magician, and Eagles are so lucky to have him. And you feel like whoever's here, they're going to have a good O-line as long as Stout's running the show.
Yeah, and even if they're going to have some backups too that are coming back. We'll see about Herbie. He's restricted free agent, so they'll have to figure out how to get him back. I think they'll be able to, but they still have Dillard on the team. Maybe they trade him. I would be open to that, but if not, you still have he's a decent backup at least. You have LaRaven Clark, who's a veteran in the league. You have Sua Opeta, who's played quite a bit for being as deep a backup as he is. You have Coyote Abasika from Buffalo, who they like quite a bit. Like they have decent backups.
Yeah, and I'm sure they'll draft a lineman at some point, just because they will. They have a lot of picks and they'll draft one. So they're in good hands on the O-line, but certainly Brandon Brooks is somebody we'll all miss.